everybody. Thank you very much for joining today. I think we will get things kicked off here. So the topic today is deploying Power BI dashboards internally and externally without user licensing. Myself, I'm Logan Guest. I'm our sales and marketing manager at Extranet User Manager. So I get to work with a lot of different clients and a lot of different partners surrounding our ISV Extranet User Manager products, and more recently we've been doing a lot around Power BI, integrating that into our own products, as well as working on a lot of different client projects with Power BI. So we thought this topic would be really interesting for everyone. Just quick, some Teams meeting etiquette. This is a regular Teams meeting, so the chat's open through the webinar. Feel free to ask any questions, make any comments throughout. If you don't mind, please stay on mute. If you'd like to actually chat in the conversation, please ask on chat, and we can bring you right in. And most importantly, enjoy the content and learn a thing or two. Just some background quick on Extranet User Manager as a company. We've evolved very much so with Microsoft, starting way back in 2008, really building bespoke extranets. And then through there, moving away from building on-premises extranets into focusing really on that Microsoft 365 story. We've had several versions of the product released from that standpoint, with our latest being 100% focused on that Azure AD Microsoft 365 story. And Peter's actually going to show some cool stuff today around this whole EUM platform that we've built on our side. From a customer perspective, very fortunate to work in all different industries, and well over 100 customers deployed globally from that perspective. And then maybe I'll hand it over to you, Peter, to do your intro and roll with agenda from there.
Sure, thanks, Logan. Peter Carson here, President of Extranet User Manager, also in Office Apps and Services, MVP. Contact information is in the deck. We are recording, so we're going to put the recording up by tomorrow, and we'll post the deck up there as well, so you'll have all of our information through there. In terms of our agenda for today, we've done the introductions. We're going to start, for those of you that maybe aren't that familiar with Power BI, we'll do a bit of an overview of that. We'll get into the licensing models. Typical Microsoft, it's not simple. They tend to complicate things when it comes to licensing. So we'll try and explain that as best we can. We have an article that we'll actually link you to as well that goes deeper onto that topic as well. And then we'll talk about Power BI Embedded. We'll explain what that is as we get deeper in, but it's basically a way of using Power BI outside of Microsoft 365. It's in Microsoft Azure, and you pay on a consumption basis rather than a user basis, which is really the main focus for today's talk. Now, with that, security is up to you. So we're going to talk about some security best practices, things you should do from that point of view. And we're going to intersperse as we go through here with some different Power BI scenarios and what that looks like. As Logan mentioned, the chat's open, so feel free to ask questions as you go. I may not see them as they go by, but Logan and others on the call can certainly respond to those. And if there's a good spot, Logan, feel free to interrupt and pause, and we can address those as we go through. So let's start with what is Power BI, BI being business intelligence. The term has been around in the industry for several decades now. We've worked in a lot of different flavors through that. SQL Server reporting services, business scorecard manager, different Microsoft products over the years around that. I've become a big fan of Power BI twofold. One is that it's really good at connecting to lots of different data sources and pulling those together and building your model. You don't have to be a super database expert to work with it. It is a technical exercise building the model. But then once you've got that model there, being able to have rich visualizations and be able to show that out, publish them up to various different environments on the web, on apps and things like that is really what it's all about. So I find the best way to explain it is actually just to jump into an example scenario. So here, let me go over here into the Power BI service. So I'm signed into Microsoft 365 here. I've gone to Power BI. I am licensed for it. We'll talk a bit more about what you need to have in order to be able to do that. And this is an anonymized version of a dashboard that we actually use for Envision IT. We've got 18 staff on the team right now, and we've built an internal application for doing leave request tracking. And Power BI is a really good way to visualize what comes out of that. We've got data in SharePoint lists that get used for the requests and the approvals. We've got time tracking data that ties into that. We've got things in QuickBooks from a financial point of view. And Power BI can pull that content together and mash it all up and give a very quick visual from here. I mean, you can get sort of traditional style reports where it's just, tabular, paginated reports with a lot of detail on it. I actually don't find these views that useful. I do literally feel that a picture is worth 1,000 words. Being able to see a visualization like this quickly give me a sense of, okay, where are we tracking from a leave request point of view, how are my staff doing, how much vacation remaining is there and such from there. But it's not a static report. That's the other thing with Power BI is it's very interactive. I can say, hey, I just want to look at it from a vacation perspective or maybe just from a personal day perspective. So as I interact with one of the visuals on here, it actually cross filters and selects any other visuals across there. And I could go to one of these other visualizations here and say, hey, maybe I just want to look at staff member 2. I can see their details here. I can see their vacation remaining here and get all that kind of information. Now, Deb is my director of finance. I mean, she does use the detail behind here to do reconciliation to say, hey, do people have a certain number of days remaining? Does that match? Is everything good from that point of view? Does it jive with our time tracking entries and such? And how much are people carrying over as we go to year? And there's policies around how many days you can bring across from there. So it's handy to get to that level of detail, but where I really like Power BI is at this visualization level. Now, if you do get deeper into that paginated style of reports, there is what's called Power BI Premium that allows you to build paginated reports. Now, there's a couple different ways that you can do this. I'm going to show you an example using the premium services. You can actually do them right in the base service itself as well. There's some third-party vendors as well that extend this to make it a little more flexible and easy to use. But these are for reports where you do need sort of a printed style format to that. So let me come over here and bring this example up. We're going to talk more about Electricity Canada a little bit later. They're one of our clients. We've built a portal. We actually just launched at the beginning of this month. They have about 4,000 members that represent, the big hydro generation and transmission companies, but also corporate partners that work with those organizations. And they run a lot of committees. They've got 50 plus different councils and committees within their association. And this report is something they need to generate to be able to say, hey, who from which company is a member of each of the committees. So, I mean, I can go through this. Actually, I think I've left it sitting here too long. Let me just refresh that, and then I can interact with it a bit more. So it's pulling data from our portal that we've created for them. I'll show you in a minute. That data is not just in the portal, it's synced to Salesforce, it's used by MailChimp for e-newsletters, lots of different purposes, but we can mash that data up here and present it out very easily. So I can go through the different committees, get a sense of who's on each of those committees. If I want to, I can download the report, I can print it, I can export it to a variety of different formats, PDF being the most common one, but maybe you want it in Excel or as CSV values so you can do different things with it. There's lots that you can do from that point of view. So those are sort of the two styles of reports in Power BI, and they have two different designers associated with them. When we're talking about the visual reports, the leave request first example, this is that same report, but I have it open here in Power BI desktop. So this is actually the authoring environment. You can build the reports in the browser, but I find it better working in Power BI desktop. You can get into the underlying data model. I won't get too technical here, but you can see the different data sources and relationships through here and the queries underneath that. You can actually build out rich queries with what's called Power Query to pull that data together, transform it, and be able to then present it up through there. And then likewise for things like that Electricity Canada report, this is Report Builder, which is another tool. Both of these tools are free. You can download them for free from the Microsoft website. Same idea. This particular report, I'm actually pointing at a model that I built in Power BI Desktop, so you can use it for nice visualizations, but then all that work that you did getting those queries together and getting that data together, you can leverage in tabular or paginated reports here as well. I could connect to other data sources as part of that as well. So that's sort of the two styles of reports and the two tools that you use for building those reports out. Now, from a service point of view, When I was showing you that leave request, I was in Power BI Pro. I was in Microsoft 365, and I have a Power BI Pro license assigned to my account, and I'm able to bring those reports up. There's a Power BI Premium. You actually need this SKU here in order to see those paginated style reports built with Report Builder. So that's sort of an additional cost. We'll get into dollars in a minute through here. There's also a Power BI embedded and a Power BI report server. This one here you can actually deploy into your own environment. I mean, we're pretty bullish on doing everything in the cloud these days, but there's still some clients that need or want to run their own on-premises data center, and you can actually run Power BI as a version in that as well. And then from a consumer point of view, somebody who's going to consume one of these reports and interact with it rather than building it, obviously the browser is probably the easiest, most obvious example through that. But there is iOS and Android apps for your mobile devices that you can bring your Power BI dashboards to life on your mobile device. There's web parts. You can embed it on different SharePoint pages. You can embed it right into Microsoft Teams. You can actually interact right through Power BI Desktop itself. I mentioned that this tool is a free tool. You could download it, build your own reports, do your own things, do some crazy stuff from a query point of view, and consume it yourself right in Power BI Desktop. You don't have to pay Microsoft anything to do that. You're just using your own local resources to do that. But typically, you do want to get into a licensed model, and this is where a lot of organizations experience challenges. And like everything Microsoft, unfortunately, it gets quite confusing. So there is a number of different per user standalone licenses. There's a free, a pro, and a premium. Now, I put a strike through on the free. It causes a ton of confusion out in the marketplace because people say, hey, I've got 10,000 free Power BI licenses. Everybody in my organization can use Power BI. You got to understand what free means. Free means that I can build a report in Power BI Desktop and I can publish it to my free workspace and I can consume it myself. I can't share it with anybody else. I can't do anything more with that. If I want to share it to somebody else, I have to have either a pro or premium license as well as the person that's going to consume it. So the paid is not just for people that create reports. Anybody that wants to look at a report that somebody else has made can't be on the free. They got to be on one of these other models through here. So that's probably the biggest takeaway from a licensing point of view is, for the most part, just ignore that free SKU. It's just a confusion point. It's typically pro or premium. Now we'll get into the differences between those. They are per user licenses, and then there's differences in what those can do within that. But there's also a consumption-based licensing. We'll talk more about that as well. Now, for some organizations, they've got Microsoft 365 E5, or they've got an Office 365 E5, which is kind of the top tier of the enterprise license for Microsoft 365 as a whole. That includes the Pro license as part of that E5. So if your users are licensed for E5, they're good to go. They can share reports. They can view other people's reports. They're all licensed up. For everybody else, you typically need to add on license as part of that, or to go one of these consumption models through here. But let's do a bit of a deeper dive into the different plans. So we've got the Pro, the Premium. Now, originally there was just Premium capacity, which meant you bought it for your organization. And then about a year, maybe 2 years ago, they added the Premium per user on there as well. We won't go into all the details, but basically you get more functionality as you move up the queue here. You can build much bigger models in the Premium. You can refresh it more often. You can do application lifecycle management as you get into more enterprise scale reports, and you've got a lot more storage. 10 gig per user versus 100 terabytes is a big difference there. And then when you get into the capacity, here you're not getting a per user license. You're actually buying it for your organization, and you're purchasing a certain amount of capacity for your organization. And you can even auto scale that. What that means is that if there's particular times of the day, maybe in the middle of the night, you're barely using it, you want to go down to the lowest SKU so you're not paying as much money for it. And then during the day, if you've got tens of thousands of users looking at reports, maybe you need to beef that up. It'll scale itself up. And you basically pay by the hour depending on the consumption that you use from there. So let's get to the money slide. What does this actually cost you? These dollars are all Canadian dollars. We're based in Canada. You can convert to your appropriate currency from there. If you're joining from the US, 30 cents on the dollar, so $10 per month US for that first one, $12.80 Canadian. So basically every user in your organization that you want to have the ability not just to publish reports, but to consume reports, needs one of those Pro per user licenses. If they need the premium features, and you can mix and match. You don't have to have everybody Pro or everybody premium. You could say, hey, most people Pro is fine, but we've got a few people that need premium. Go ahead and do that. You can assign the license user by user from that point of view. $25.60 per month Canadian for those users that need the premium features. Now the premium capacity, obviously that dollar is significantly higher, and it goes up from there. I mean, if you need more capacity, you can get into tens or even hundreds of thousands of dollars a month in terms of capacity. You're talking about a big enterprise organization at that point there. The nice thing here, though, is once you've paid those dollars, you don't need to worry about any user licensing through there. Everybody just shares that capacity. It's not an unlimited capacity. Obviously, the more people you put on it, the more heavily loaded the capacity is going to be. And if you exceed a certain point, it's just not going to be responsive, or it may even start failing, which is where you want to do the auto scale and start bumping it up to a higher capacity. Now, the hidden secret that we're going to talk a lot more about today is this Power BI embedded. It's not part of the Microsoft 365. You won't find it anywhere on the Microsoft 365 pages. You'll find it in Microsoft Azure. We've got the links to both of these in here. And basically, it's a consumption model, just like the capacity model here, but you pay by the hour. And it starts at $1.30 per hour for the lowest tier of capacity. And it's got the same ability to auto scale as this one here. So you can leave it running at a low capacity and increase it when you need more. You can have it auto scale up, so it does that automatically for you. The beauty of this one, though, that you can't do with the premium over here, is you can actually suspend and resume it. So you can say, hey, I only need it during business hours, Monday to Friday, say 10 hours a day. That's 50 hours a week, 200 hours a month. A full month typically is about 740 hours, but you're only using it for about a quarter of the time. So 200 times that, you're talking, what's that, $260 a month to run that versus 6,394. Big difference. And I'm going to talk about some logic apps and some functionality we built that actually automatically turn it on and off on demand, so you don't have to go hit the switch and remember to turn it off and on. You can do it on a schedule, or you can do it when people request reports through there. So just a quick question there on the E3 or E5 license. So Power BI Pro is included in the E5 license, not the E3. I'm pretty sure on. I mean, the licensing matrix that's very complicated at Microsoft, but that's my understanding is E5 is the one that includes that. And the embedded, yes, it has unlimited users, but you have to understand as you put more people on it, you're going to need more capacity. So there is still sort of a correlation cost to number of users. If you say, hey, I've got 100,000 users that need to be looking at reports all at the same time, you're going to be into something more than $1.30 an hour to run that. But it's all depending on your capacity requirements. And again, you can scale that up based on the demand, so you don't have to plan ahead for what scale you have that running at. Now, the other confusing point for a lot of folks is guest access into Power BI. Now, we've been spoiled for years that SharePoint Online, even SharePoint on premises for many years, had no licensing requirement for guests. You could literally pay $6 Canadian a month for a Microsoft 365 Business Basic subscription for one user, and you could invite 1 million people into your SharePoint Online. Microsoft may not be happy about that, but their licensing actually supports that model, because external users, as long as they're not part of your organization, do not require any license to interact with SharePoint, to come into Yammer, to join Teams meetings. A lot of the Microsoft 365 stack doesn't require specific guest licensing. Power BI does not fit into that bucket. Power BI, everybody who uses it needs to be licensed. So if you invite a guest user in to view your report, which you can absolutely do, you can share it just like you do a document in SharePoint or a SharePoint site. They either need a Power BI license themselves, or you can actually assign one of your licenses that you pay for to their guest account in your tenant. But it gets pretty messy. I mean, you don't know from guest to guest whether they're already licensed themselves, or they need to buy them a license, or how that's going to account from that point of view. So it gets quite confusing from that point of view. And that's really where the Power BI Premium and the Power BI Embedded start to shine. You don't know exactly who's going to be coming in as guests. But it doesn't matter, because when you're using either the premium or the embedded model, you're paying for capacity and there's no user licensing, and that applies to guests as well as part of that. I mean, the only caveat, not to do with guests, but to do with licensing here, is you need at least one licensed user that can publish the report into the service, but then everybody else uses the capacity from there. So the sharing of content is done through Azure Active Directory B2B, so the same way sharing is done in Teams and SharePoint Online. And guests typically have consumption experience. Normally you want to publish a report so they can consume it, they can view it, but you can actually elevate them and say, hey, you're able to edit, you're able to manage reports in my organization as a workspace if you choose to, just like you can make somebody an administrator of your SharePoint site as a guest. There's no rules against that. It's just not your typical scenario from there. And there's an article here with a deeper link around some considerations and limitations around the guest access. So as you can tell, I'm a big fan of Power BI Embedded, and this is where we're going to go deeper on this talk, because the title of the topic is how do you share it internally and externally without user licensing? You have to use one of those capacity models to do it. Either it's that premium service that starts at $6,000 and change, or it's the Azure Power BI Embedded, and I quite like the Power BI Embedded. So you've got all the functionality of Power BI. That's all there. There's no user licensing for either external or external users. There's no specific credentials that they need to log in with. They're using their Azure AD B2B credentials, so either their organizational credentials, could be a one-time passcode, could be their Gmail, their Facebook, their Apple ID. Microsoft keeps adding more and more options for people to come in from a B2B point of view. So the Azure Power BI Embedded is the one that we're going to focus on, not the Power BI Premium offer. So there's a Microsoft Docs article link here that goes deeper into that. But really, there's two scenarios that Power BI Embedded was built for, that Microsoft sort of envisioned when they were creating this product. And they are either embedding for your organization or embedding for your customers as a independent software vendor. We actually do both of these. We're going to be talking about some client scenarios a little bit later, but we've actually embedded it right into our ISV products as well. So again, there's a Docs article that goes bigger into those from that perspective. So what does this look like? I'm actually going to use our Extranet User Manager portal product an example, because we've actually extended that with a new product we're launching called Data Portal that brings the Power BI embedded service right into the portal pages. And one of the things I'll talk about security in just a minute is you do have to roll your own security. The Power BI embedded doesn't deal with security at all. You need a token to access the service, but how you let people get that token is up to you, and it's part of what you need to build as part of your product. And we've baked all that into our portal product, but I'm going to talk about, if you were going to roll this yourself and build it yourself, what would you need to do from that point of view? So we've decided our Extranet User Manager product is all about bringing in external users as Azure AD B2B guests in your tenant and putting them into different groups. So we've built the security the same way to say, hey, we're going to secure reports in the embedded service against groups that are in Azure Active Directory, and the guests go into that group, and then it all hangs together nicely from there. As I mentioned before, when you're publishing these reports up, you do need a Power BI license to do that. It could be a pro or a premium, depending on which features you're using. We're using both the Paginated and the visual report, so we've got a premium license there. But if you were just doing the visual, the Power BI Pro would be fine for that point of view. And like I said, we start and stop that Power BI service in Azure. It actually has an API that Microsoft provides that you can query to say, hey, are you running? Can you start? Can you stop? So we can make use of that. We use Logic Apps, which is Microsoft's workflow tools, to say, hey, is anybody requesting a report? Yes. Is the service running? No. Okay, go turn it on. Those are all workflow steps that we built in the workflow. And it really has an impact on consumption costs from that point of view. So let's have a look at what that looks like. So if I come over here, and you'll be able to try this out yourself. I'm actually going to demo it in our portal here. So let me sign out.
So Peter, I've just sent a link out to the group if anybody
Awesome.
else would like to try it.
Yeah, so this portal.eomdemo.com, that's one of our demo tenants in Microsoft 365 that we use for customer and partner demos. So you're welcome to come here, put in your own email address, hit continue, and you'll go through an onboarding and self-registration process. And we can see here that we've got this Power BI embedded demo link here. You just click on the more information to join up for that. I just want to check, because I've done so many dry runs here, that I'm not actually in that group already. This is our admin console that we use for managing that. So this is the under the hood of that group. I'm not in there right now. Okay, I'm good to go. Okay, so I already have an account in the tenant, so I'm not going to go through the registration, but let me just go ahead and sign in. Now it's using my organizational credentials. So I'm in a browser that's already signed into our production Envision IT tenant. So I can see over here that I'm signed in with that user. And these are the groups that I already belong to. But I'm curious to try out this Power BI embedded demo. So I can say, hey, let's go ahead and click on that, because we've got this concept of public groups, and join that group. And you can turn on approvals, you can set whitelists or email domains as to how you onboard people to groups. We've kept this one completely wide open with no approvals, so anybody can try it out themselves. So I'm now in that group, and I can go to that group page here, and we've got a couple of dashboards visible and available here. So the document inventory analysis one is the one that I was showing a minute ago. So it was checking to see if the service was running and then bringing the report up, and now I see the report embedded right in my portal. And the portal doesn't need to look like this. I'll show you different examples as we get into client scenarios. You can completely brand that yourself from there. Or sorry, this is the leave request one that I was showing previously. The other one was one we use a lot for doing migration projects. We inventory and build a dashboard of clients on-premises SharePoint, file shares, things like that to prepare for migrations. But go ahead, try it out and give it a whirl, and you'll get a sense of what that looks like. Now, under the hood for a minute, if I come over to, which one did I have this in? So I've got too many browser sessions going here. So this is our development tenant, not the one that I was just showing you, but it's a good example. We can see here, if I refresh this page, the Power BI embedded service, this is in the Azure portal, is not currently running. I can start it up through here, but we actually have a workflow that does that automatically when somebody wants to view a report and work with that. And I came over here before the session. I was just curious, so I'm in that same dev tenant. This is actually one of our MSDN subscriptions we're using for development, and the only thing we have running it is the Power BI embedded service. Now, we started our billing period on March 8th, so it's actually been 14 days, 2 weeks that it's been running, but nobody's been really using the reports in dev, so we've only spent $1.44. We've only had it running for an hour. It basically turns on for 15 minutes, and then if nobody asks for another report, it shuts itself back off again from there. So it can be super cost effective for organizations that don't need reports served up all the time from that point of view.
Hey, Peter, while we're here, there are some good questions from Thomas and Bernard. Want to take a look at those?
Sure. Actually, I'm going to take Bernard's first. So this is a point that I didn't think about when I was putting the deck together that I'm glad you raised as a point. The question is, can I use Azure Embedded to expose reports publicly without the user signing in? There is one licensing scenario that I missed in there, which is if you want to publish reports from your Microsoft 365 Power BI service anonymously to the public, Microsoft actually lets you do that for free. So you don't need embedded, you don't need the premium capacity. You can do just one user, $12 a month Canadian per that user, and publish that report and embed it, say, on your public website, and anybody in the world can come hit that report and see that. You don't need to do anything more from that. So that's actually a nice way of doing it. If you want to control access to the report, you don't want to make it anonymously available, then you need to do what I was showing here in terms of building it into an application and wrapping that around. So Thomas's question was around, so going deeper on the security side, that's a good point. There's what's called row level security. So the idea is, the first level of security is, are you allowed to see this report? And that's something that we bake in as part of our core functionality. If you're rolling it yourself using Power BI Embedded, you'll need to build that kind of functionality. But once somebody's in the report, maybe they don't get to see all the data. That's something you need to do at the report level. And yes, you can absolutely do that in all of the different models. To say, hey, if there's some metadata on the report, let's say you've got a partner opportunity report. This is an example we're actually building out right now because we're building out a new customer and partner portal for our partners of Extranet User Manager. We want them to be able to see their opportunities from our Dynamics 365 CRM. Obviously, we don't want them to see other partners' opportunity and start trying to steal those opportunities. That's the scenario for row-level security, where the report actually says, hey, who are you? What organization do you belong to? And let me filter that data down so you're only allowed to see what should belong to you. That's something that you need to build into the report itself. Once you've done that, however you choose to publish it through any of these models, we'll then support it from that point of view. Yeah, Bernard, I just saw your last comment. Wow, something for free. It's not typical Microsoft, but it's been there for a number of years there. We've got a bunch of clients that do use it from that point of view. And we haven't launched this yet, but we're actually building a whole dashboard for our product itself, and we're going to embed it into our EUM admin app that I briefly showed you before. So this will show us all sorts of activity of what's happening in your tenant from an Azure AD B2B point of view. So if I come back over here, this is our dev tenant that I'm looking at here right now. You know, we can see the activity. Where are people coming in from? What country are they signing in from? Who's signing in? We actually have a shared account under my name, which is why we're seeing so many sign-ins from that one there. What browser are they using? What does it look like over time? What are failures and successes through there? You can even drill down and say, hey, I'm curious about those 161 failures. What does that look like? You know, these are the different reasons for that. These are the different applications they were trying to sign into when it failed. Most of these are actually because we're developers and we're messing around with this system all the time, that we didn't have the right permissions in there, flows expire, different things like that. It's not so much that we're being hacked. It's interesting when we look at clients' data from this, you know, some of it gets pretty scary when you realize how many real accounts are being attempted to sign in from Russia or, you know, some other nefarious country and being blocked for different reasons. From that point of view, you realize how important cybersecurity is and such from that. Okay. So security, you know, I touched on this a little bit before. So the thing is, if you're building your app in Power BI embedded, so you're going to use the Azure service, you have to build an app that then surfaces up your reports for you. So there is some work there, and we've got some Microsoft Docs articles that explains how to do that. You do need to roll your own security, and the Docs articles are not super strong on this. I mean, they take you down a path of using usernames and passwords, which is a really bad idea from a security point of view. They touch very lightly on securing it with certificates and doing it a more modern way from that point of view. That's what we've done in our product. So without getting too deep onto the technical side, when your app talks to the Power BI service, it needs what's called an access token, and that comes from Azure Active Directory to say this person is allowed to do this thing with your service. So you have to figure out how you're going to generate that token. So you're responsible for getting that token, and what we do under the hood is we say, what report are you asking to look at? What groups does that report require, and do you belong to one of those groups? And if all that aligns properly, then we generate a token for you that's just valid for you and you alone to view that report that you asked for. So it's not like somebody else can then use that token on your behalf. It's not like you can use that token to look at a different report. We've locked it down tightly from that point of view. And it all comes down to leveraging groups properly in Azure Active Directory. You can decide to architect however you want from that point of view. We found that worked well. And we actually keep a list in SharePoint that says, hey, this report that's in this workspace has these groups that provide access to it. So it's very easy to maintain, to say, hey, I want to publish a new report. I just add a new entry into the list and publish it up on a page. People can then go to it and see it from there. So let's take you into some actual scenarios here. For the first one, we actually work with a number of different organizations that are associations. So they represent an industry or not-for-profits, charities, things like that. So there's a few here. I mean, it's World Benchmarking Canada that we're going to dive into, Electricity Canada, Ontario Association of Children's Aid Societies. OCAS we've worked with for many years. Electricity Canada and MBNCanada are more recent from that point of view. But typically what we're doing for them is building both some public portion to a website for them and a secured members only area around that. And analytics and reports often become a big part of that, particularly for MBNCanada, Electricity Canada. I mentioned on Electricity Canada, they have all these councils and committees. A bunch of those committees have, they call data portals, where they collect data from their members and then they roll that up and present that back out, which is exactly what municipal benchmarking does as well. Their members are major municipalities across Canada, and they contribute service area metrics on how that particular municipality is performing in different areas. And they have about 700 different measures. There's a lot of data that they collect as part of that. And then they mash it up and provide it back privately to their members, to their board, and then a certain subset of it to actually make publicly available as part of that. And both those organizations were using on-premises SQL Server and SQL Server reporting services and a bunch of old legacy forms applications to update that data. It was really onerous, and it had a lot of risk there. The technology was out of date and out of life, so they both wanted to move to the cloud. And that's really what we're going to talk about here, is how have we moved that across to the cloud. Now, other things that they often do, committees, groups have meetings, quarterly meetings and such, and meeting packages and such from their knowledge bases. There's often a learning management system. All three of these have LMS requirements as part of that. E-commerce, different onboarding scenarios, whether it's private or people can actually register through there. So let's take the Electricity Canada members portal. This one actually just launched on March 1st, so it's just gone out there, and it's new features are still coming in. There's a whole learning management system that's about to launch next month. We're working with a couple other companies to build that out for them. The big thing for them was to have single sign-on. As members coming into this portal, whether I want to look at a report or I want to input the data for that report or go to an LMS or do something else, don't make me have 4 different IDs, which is where Electricity Canada was 6 months ago before we started this project. They had all these different systems and no single sign-on. There was no single data platform for reporting from there. So you can hit the site yourself. If you go to portal.electricity.ca, you'll see their homepage. Most of their content is on their public website. This is really just a front page to the portal itself. You can see the upcoming training that's going in through here. I can log in. If I put a sort of a dummy email address in there, it'll take me through the self-registration process, and it knows, am I coming from a member domain, corporate partner, or somebody from the public through there. So that's pretty cool. We're actually going to go deeper in a future webinar on the whole association management side of it. But I want to go deeper in this session on MBNCanada. This one's gone a little further from the data portal point of view, and there's a really interesting story here. So as I mentioned, MBN is an association that has 13 partner municipalities across the province that contribute measures from a performance point of view that they can then compare within their members. So they've got over 1,000 different users across those municipalities because they've got a lot of service areas and a lot of people for each service area that they're collecting that data from. And just collecting that data was a real challenge. Never mind, how do you then present it back out to them through a data portal side of things? So right now we're building the data entry side of it. We're going to be launching that for mid-May, and then over the next couple months into the summer, we're actually going to be rolling the data portal out. But I think there's a good story here to take you through not just how do you present reports, but actually how do you collect the data for those reports. So let's go into their development site. So this site's not live yet. This is all dummy data in our dev environment right now. If I switch my account just to take you back to the beginning here, and we'll go through that whole process. So again, I'm using my organizational credentials. I'm a guest in this tenant. I don't need to pay any licensing from a SharePoint or from a Teams point of view, because we're going to be using the Power BI embedded. I won't need any user licensing from that perspective as well. So depending on who I am, I can see all the different groups that I belong to through here. We're actually going to take the Sudbury example as a scenario to work through here. So imagine I'm what's called a municipal lead at Sudbury. So I can see who all the other members of my team from Sudbury are. I can get their email addresses, communicate back and forth easily with them, so I understand who's doing what from the program point of view. And then we decided to actually use Excel Online as a data entry to collect all the data to go into these reports. So we've got 3 different Excels. I'm just going to open them up in 3 different tabs here. I'm actually going to start with the last one first, which is the security matrix. And the idea here is they've got a pretty complex security scenario. So these are all the different service areas basically the departments within the municipalities that contribute different measures. And they have privacy requirements between those, that police can't share their data with another part of the organization, and so on and so forth from there. So the municipal lead uses this Excel to invite all the people in. So they just start adding rows through here with names and email addresses, and they'll get invitations. They can come to the portal. And then depending on which permission you put for each person, for each column in here, they'll get access to different parts of the system from there, both from a reporting point of view and from a data entry point of view. So we try to keep it really simple. There's a lot of people to manage here, over 1,000 people coming in. Let each municipal lead manage it themselves. MBNCanada doesn't need to manage those external users. And then when they come in and say, I'm a municipal lead, there's sort of some top level data that goes into the data portal. Things like, what's the population of Sudbury? We've cleared out all the other data. We didn't want to share anything confidential or private in here, but basically they would bang in the white cells here. The gray cells, if I try and type on them, the sheet is protected. We've actually made it a data entry form so they can't mess it up. And then let's say I'm responsible for police services. We can see examples of all the different metrics here. And I would plug in the numerators and denominators, how many violent crimes there were in Sudbury, pick a number there, and it auto calculates. It's got all the formulas in there. So we use the power of Excel to build all that out from that point of view. If I come down to a particular measure in here, the total cost for police services per capita, let's go ahead and just dive in. We've got a hyperlink on that. We take them back to the portal, and we've got a whole data dictionary that defines all these measures that are in this data portal, so they can understand, how does the calculation get built out, and what do I need to do in my organization to go get that information. And as a member of MBNCanada, they can actually come into the portal and say, hey, I want to edit this. We've got a whole content management system, so they can update the explanation of what's in the data portal. And then later we're going to add in the ability for the municipalities to do the same thing. They won't be able to edit the organization level data dictionary, but they can explain their own information. Where do I go to get this data? Oh, it's in SAP and it's in this spot here. So that next year maybe it's somebody new at that municipality that's collecting that data. They've got all that background and all that information to work with from there. And I can move up the hierarchy to say, hey, I'm curious about all the measures under police services. We can see some top level data dictionary details around that. And then I've got all my measures here. We haven't hyperlinked to all of them. We've just got the one in there right now. And then I can go up another level to say, hey, let's go right up to the data dictionary level and see all the different service areas. So a very rich portal to explain the data side of it. So that as people are entering that data and bringing it together, there's consistency, because you want to be able to do apples to apples comparisons between different municipalities as you go through that. Okay. The second scenario that I want to talk about is organizations that are using what's called SQL Server reporting services. So this has been around for Microsoft for better part of 2 decades or maybe longer. It's basically a way to build those paginated style reports like that committee members report that I showed you at the beginning of the session. And there's lots of these out there. We've got organizations that have hundreds or even thousands of different reports built in this way. And they might be running on SharePoint 2010, on SharePoint 2013, and that's all end of life. Like SharePoint 2010 went end of life 2 years ago. SharePoint 2013 is going end of life in about 18 months from now in October of 2023. So the clock is ticking. You got to get off this old technology. Microsoft's not going to support it anymore. If it's business critical for your organization, it's a big risk factor. So they're deprecating SQL Server reporting services, and the Power BI report server is the on-premises replacement for that. But honestly, you should be moving to the cloud, and using things like Power BI Embedded just makes a ton of sense from there. We're working through this with a number of organizations where that clock is ticking and they need to get those reports shut down. You could actually take a report that was built in SQL Server reporting services, called an RDL file. It's just the file extension like a .doc file. And you can load it in that report builder that I was showing you and publish it to a Power BI Premium workspace, and it'll just start working from there. There's some gotchas you've got to be aware of from there, but it's a nice migration story from there. So you can take all of that on-premises stuff, move it up into the cloud. If you need to still access your on-premises data, maybe you've got SQL servers on-premise that you need to work with, there's an enterprise data gateway from Microsoft that lets the cloud talk to your on-premise infrastructure. It's all secure. It doesn't cost anything extra from that point of view. So there's a lot of options to consider as you work through from that point of view. So that's another scenario that we see a lot of, and we've got a couple of active projects going on from that perspective. I'm actually going a little faster than I thought. This is the first time I've delivered this talk, so never sure from a pacing point of view exactly how I'm going. So we may give it a little bit of time back through there, because we're already at the wrap-up points here. Basically, yes, there are a lot of ways to license Power BI. If you go back to that licensing slide, when you pull the deck down, it's got a link to an article. Let me take a minute now just to bring that up on the browser here. So if you come to our extranetUserManager.com website, actually the top article that we've got in there, we've got 2 on this topic here to have a look at. This one here goes a little deeper into the licensing models and costs and feature differences and such through there. And it's got a bunch of links to the Microsoft Docs article. So check that one out. Logan, maybe if you want to chat that out to the group as well, even though it's in the deck. And the Microsoft 365 Power BI Premium, the one that's $6,000 and change a month to start with, is not the only capacity model. It's kind of hidden in the Microsoft pricing sites. It's buried down in the Azure pricing site, but the embedded is definitely another model to consider. Now, it's not turnkey. You can't just turn it on and start using it. You have to build an app in front of it to start working with it from there. We've built it in our product. You could leverage that. We can provide consulting if you're interested in doing something unique for your organization as a bespoke build, or like I said, there's docs articles there. There's sample code that they provide that didn't take us that long to work through to figure out how to do that. Because I'm a strong proponent that having Power BI for everybody in the organization is really valuable. Being able to go to the homepage of your intranet or down to different parts of your intranet and have dashboards on how your organization is working, it's not useful if not everybody in your organization can see it. So figure out a way to do that, whether it's licensing everybody. If you've got everyone licensed for E5, great. It's not cheap. We're talking $50, $60 a month per user for E5 licenses. But if you've done that for other reasons, you can definitely leverage Power BI for that. If not, think about some of the capacity models from there. There is work to use embedded, but consider it from that point of view. And by all means, try out the Data portal. Go to this link here, give it a whirl. You can experience it and get a sense of what that looks like. So from a next steps point of view, as I mentioned, we record these sessions always. So we've got a YouTube channel. We'll post those up through there, and we'll post the slides up onto the event page itself. So if you're back at our website, if you just come, it's actually right on the call to action here. So if you're on this events page, this join webinar will turn into a view recording and download the slides. So that's all available for you. If you'd like to schedule some time, there's a Calendly link in the deck here that goes to Logan's Calendly. He's got slots available in there, so pick a 30-minute slot. Love to have a deeper discussion from that. We will also send a follow-up email out, so there'll be a link to a Microsoft Forms poll in there. We try and keep it very, very quick and easy to answer from that point of view. We're always curious, as we're thinking of topics from a webinar perspective, what resonates well for people. If you've got topics that maybe aren't even on our list of future events, but you think it might be something interesting, by all means suggest it. Always cool to see what sort of ideas are coming in from that. In terms of upcoming sessions that we do have, we're actually getting back to physical conferences. I spoke at a conference in DC in December last year. Caught COVID, wasn't great, but didn't knock me out for too long. But Logan and I are actually going down to Vegas the week after next for the Microsoft 365 conference. I'm going to be giving a talk on Teams and Microsoft 365 external users. So this whole idea of how do you manage people outside of your organization? What does that look like, both from a small scale and from a large scale? What can you do out of the box, and what can you do beyond that? And then we just posted up 2 new events that we're planning for beginning and end of May. The first one is effective board and committee management. We're actually going to go a lot deeper into that Electricity Canada scenario. We've got some cool stuff that we've built there around meetings management and board management. So you can have each board or each committee has its own team site in SharePoint, but you've got a very easy portal interface on top of that. So board members, committee members don't need to get confused by Microsoft 365. We got a whole workflow for scheduling board and committee meetings that creates the team meetings and the invites and the supporting documents and links it all together. So it's pretty slick. So check that out if you're interested in May 3rd. And then May 31st, this is actually on the Envision IT side of the house, which is our Microsoft 365 consulting side. We've done a bunch of projects there, a couple for municipalities, County of Simcoe, Region of Halton, around integrating their line of business systems, predominantly SAP, but Salesforce, Dynamics 365 as well. And how do you build things like employee self-service forms, workflows, and things like that easily? You know, yes, there's Power Apps and Power Automate. That's one path that you can take. We actually have an alternate path that leverages more Logic App workflows and kind of back to that consumption model rather than that per user model. Logic Apps works in that model and is super strong from an enterprise integration point of view. So lots of ideas to share from that perspective. Logan, were there other questions that I missed as we went through that we want to circle back on?
No, I think you covered all the questions, Peter.
Okay. Cool. I think we're at a wrap there. I'll give everybody 10 minutes back to their lunch hour, depending on time zone that you're in. Thanks very much for joining us and look forward to having you tune in to future webinars. Take care.